Is that just for you, Nader? Yes. Yes, because you can. You hear, we got you.
I give you signals, Nader. One false quarter, 1-0.
I'm old, but I can still run circles around all of you.
Oh, okay. We'll see.
It is 10 o'clock. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Have the meeting for the Division of Code Enforcement. And with me, I have President Pro Tem Hogan, Councilor Nave, Madam President Hudson, Councilor Williams, Councilor Monto, myself, Councilor Jones-Rouser, and the Neighborhood Business Development Team. You guys want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Michael Collins, Commissioner, Department of Neighborhood and Business Development.
Jake Dishaw, Deputy Commissioner of Code Enforcement and Zoning Administration.
And so we're just going to jump right into some background on the code enforcement team. We're just joined by Councilor Peniagua. And in that, can you just break down the differences in the C of A, C of O, C of C?
Sure. So the Division of Code Enforcement is the largest division within the Department of Neighborhood and Business Development. A lot of functions come out of our division, including what I would just label as traditional code enforcement, but much more beyond that too. That includes building and permitting, the inspections that go along with those services. It now includes full zoning administration and enforcement, and all business licensing citywide. But beyond that, there's a lot more services that we provide. We pretty much touch anything that you can think of that happens around housing and quality of life. If not out of code enforcement directly, definitely indirectly from other services that we partner with the rest of our Department of Neighborhood and Business Development on. So that includes things like blight busting, our vacant property maintenance. It includes demolitions or follow-up from fires, which many times result in demolitions or at least cleanup and hopefully rehabilitation of those properties. It includes CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design, so cleanups of homeless encampments or problem areas within the city that we're focusing on to cut down on overgrowth or pick up trash, things that impact quality of life in our neighborhoods. It includes our home unit, high occupancy monitoring and enforcement team. So that's all the work that went around like services that we provided for the Skyline and the Green Apartments, large congregate living settings that we're focusing on improving quality of life for those constituents that not only live there, but live around these properties citywide. So I always think about us as the first line of defense for many of our constituents citywide, whether it's something more minor in nature like overgrowth or trash, or more serious in nature, unfit living conditions, things like structural concerns or sewage backup or no heat, no water. You know, we are first responders in a lot of situations where we go out and interact with the public. And as the council knows, I get many complaints from each of you that often come directly from your constituents, your district constituents that report to you. And we keep pushing that. Like, we can't help unless we don't know about what's going on, especially if it's inside on a property. But many times we're out there alone. Our inspectors are out in the field alone, and they're the first ones to encounter some of these situations that can lead to additional services from the rest of our department or citywide. So a housing call about their heat not working could lead to additional services being provided. So a lot of times we're doing much more than even what we're sent to do on an inspection. But beyond that, sure. Yeah. So those severe situations would result in an unfit declaration. When that happens, we notify every public agency, and we also notify, members of the MBD team that start to work on potential relocation services. But if that's not an option and we feel like we can fix something, if the landlord won't do it, we have the emergency repair program as well. So, oh, absolutely. I mean, so the planner in MBD is basically, that works on that, is essentially doing primarily code enforcement work. I mean, that's how intertwined and connected it is. Even though that position's not in this budget for this division, they work closely together.
Yeah, close enough, Council President, that we actually have looked at putting portion of the salary for that position into the codes budget. Yeah, we didn't this year, but it may in the future. It's so Nick Pirro is the planner who's led the charge on that. We shared an update last month related to the work of that program, and it's led to preventing displacement in a number of properties.
Right, because I think that was our whole goal.
Exactly.
Was to do the repairs so that we don't have to displace people.
And it's also worked out to be, as we had hoped, something that is largely revenue neutral in the fact that we've been able to collect 50% of what we've already put out there, and what we don't collect rolls onto the taxes. So we'll either collect it through that or collect the property. And we do have a 15% admin fee on top of all of the work, so that we're reimbursing ourselves for the effort that went into it.
I think one of the things that we hear, especially recently, is the question of how do residents, especially children, slip through the cracks, right? We've seen a few situations where they have certainly done that.
Yeah.
How much
Tragic.
cooperation are you getting from the agencies, the service agencies, when you find a situation that is dire and you're saying, okay, we need help immediately because look at this. What does that line look like? Is it working?
So one of the things that we do within our department, as happens across this administration, is we're constantly looking at is the way that we're doing it the right way for us to continue to do it. Is it effective now? Is there a way to make it more effective? I can give examples of we had a clean out last year on a property over on the on north side, where we knew there were children. I had an idea of what school they went to, so I was able to call the principal directly. And the principal said, I know exactly what children you're talking about. They're already on our radar. Here's the ways that we have plugged in for supports. We do make referrals to Child Protective Services, referrals to the Department of Social Services all the time. And in the other direction, when a health department has a child that has elevated blood lead level, they have access to our code enforcement software. So they go right in and input that information about the property into it. One of the things that I get you appreciate from the question is, when you look at what the division of responsibility is, when it comes to the social services to support the people, that largely sits with the county. When it comes to the structures and the environment in which people live, that sits with us within the city. And so we do make sure that we're in constant communication with them. And, Jake had mentioned the home unit, the high occupancy monitoring enforcement. That's one where we show up with, we show up ourselves with police, fire, code enforcement, but there's been plenty of times when Jake or his team has called in county sanitarian as well. And so we've, because they are able to cite related to health code in a way that's different than we are.
Gentlemen, as I'm looking through the major functions in the first couple pages here, cost percent of total budget, permits 20%, certificates 50%, inspections 10%, rental registry 20%. Jake, as you mentioned at the beginning, a lot of our interaction focuses around the inspections and calls in response to constituent concerns. So I guess maybe naively, I would have expected that inspection to be a little bit higher in terms of your your staffing and where you go, and was hoping you could explain the rental registry being at 20% of the budget.
Sure. As I introduced, a lot of functions, a lot of inspections come out of this division. But so a simple way to kind of look at that is maybe overall inspections, you can see they're right around 80,000. So we have 9,000 plus or minus structures that need a rental registry every 3 years. So in a perfect world, if that was equal, you'd be looking at about 3,000 a year. So if we do 80,000 inspections and a third of rental registry is 3,000, you know, that might explain kind of what the cost of the budget. I mean, I guess it's not a perfect mathematical equation there if you're looking at 3,000 out of 80,000 and then comparing it to the total cost of the budget. But our inspectors that do rental registry inspections do more than just rental registry inspections. These are our housing inspectors, so they do tenant complaints, they do vacant structure monitoring, they do vacant lot monitoring. So they're involved with a little bit more than just the rental registry. That's just a portion of their job responsibility. So I think that would account for the rest of that overall cost in the budget, kind of factoring that in and what position actually inspects the rental registry program.
And in terms of the estimate being at 1,200, you mentioned a 3,000 ideal. What represents that gap?
So historically, there's been some changes with the rental registry over the years, how frequently they're required. Currently, they're required every 3 years, so it kind of can be just a situation of when an owner comes due or when a property changes hands. You know, so again, it would be ideal if we did 3,000 a year, but sometimes one of those 3 years might be a little heavier than the other. You know, it's also, you know, looking at the history of it, we're still fighting overall compliance with the rental registry. I mean, I'll be honest about that, but I will note, like, since my time overseeing this division, we've increased it from single-digit percentage compliance up to about where we are now, and we're kind of ranging between 50 and 60%, you know, as that changes monthly. But it's an important program to have. 60% or so of our constituents rent citywide. So it's more important.
60? 60?
Close to that, yes. I believe that's the number. So we're talking about a vulnerable population of people that could be in unsafe or unhealthy housing. And there's been enough media coverage lately on situations with our children in particular and the conditions that they are living in, where we either aren't aware or we become aware too late. And I can't stress enough the importance of this program and the importance of us getting inside on these inspections so we can make a meaningful difference, an impactful change. If we're just going to look at the outside from the road or the sidewalk, I mean, I won't say we may as well not do it, but that's not changing the quality of life the way it could if we get inside. Things from fire protection, lead hazard abatement, sanitation concerns, heating, you know, basic things that maybe a lot of us take for granted day to day that people have to struggle with, because it's not easy to get up and uproot and move out of your home and find comparable quality housing elsewhere. If I had to move right now, it'd be really difficult. I mean, I wouldn't want to move right now. So this is important to stabilize people within the housing units that they're in and to keep those online, which, you know, in turn, hopefully keep the property occupied on the tax roll and continue improvements for our quality of life for our citizens.
And can I kind of keep within this theme, but shift the conversation a little bit? One of the things that I have folks concerned about on the east side is the reallocation of housing units for short-term rentals. With current staffing rates, does your department have any capacity to, you know, if we move forward with, you know, some type of vision for short-term rentals in the city, does your, you know, department have any bandwidth to help with that?
So I would say that's, appreciate the question. It's something that, Councilor, we've talked about the fact that it's been on the, it's been a little bit of a back burner issue for neighborhood and business development. I wouldn't put it just on code enforcement. So to us, this is one of the reasons that neighborhood and business development is structured the way that it is. So there's some significant data polls that need to be done related to it. and then research on what else has been effective in other communities and what's not been effective in other communities. And so that's where our Division of Planning and Sustainability, or Division of Neighborhood Development and also Business Development, as it is a small business to do that,
Wouldn't zoning
work
come into
together.
place?
I'm sorry, say again?
Wouldn't zoning come into place in that?
So zoning comes in on the code enforcement side, but also on the planning side as well, definitely, because it is largely a zoning issue, but not solely a zoning issue. Yeah. So from a capacity standpoint, what I would say is we don't have the ability to move at lightning speed with it, but we do have the ability to work through it. What we won't really have the ability to evaluate and answer clearly right now until we've figured out what the right pathway forward is what capacity to enforce what we choose to legislate will look like.
If, I know it's a much larger discussion, but if the city makes a decision to move forward in addressing short-term rentals in one way or another, talking about kind of the complexity of your department structure, I hate to say it out loud, but would you need more staff?
So on the planning side, as I said, with a bit of patience and diligence, I believe we can get there. On the enforcement side, I simply can't answer that question at the moment because it depends on frequency of really what numbers are we looking at from a licensing standpoint, frequency of inspection. And rate of compliance, how much, because that then becomes our partners in law with what capacity does it take when we have non-compliant issues that are non-responsive to code enforcement.
I think we want to put together any kind of legislation to address this without any kind of research. I mean, sometimes some legislative bodies pass legislation and then just lateral to people to get it done. I don't think we want to do that. I think we got to be very careful. And as far as short-term rentals, they're not necessarily a bad thing in the neighborhoods either. I think we got to be very neutral on this as far as our judgment goes.
Yeah. So first of all, I will say in my 4 years here, one of the things that I've really appreciated about the work between the council and the administration is I've never felt like you guys have handed us an unfunded mandate. And so greatly
We
appreciate
try
that.
not to be like the state of New York.
Yeah. So to that end, when we talk about regulating, that doesn't mean that we're coming at it from the notion of the fact that it's bad. It's the fact that, well, one, we don't have it quantified, and two, as we know from the housing study, if we simply leave it completely unattended to, it may grow in ways that are not beneficial to our overall constituency. And so how do we look at it and be able to shape it in a way that would work, that would go forward? I don't think I haven't talked with anybody internally that's like, look, we need to eliminate short-term rentals. So totally understood.
Not to move too far from
No, I'm done with
Counselor
that.
Williams' question about the possibility of hiring. Just overall, for effectiveness, is 14 the needed amount of inspectors at this current time, or are we in need of more inspectors currently?
Yeah, so that number 14 is just for our housing inspectors. So I gave a brief rundown of the responsibilities of those inspectors. So they are handling rental registry, tenant complaints, vacant lots, vacant structures. So we have a bunch of different inspectors outside of that number that are doing other tasks. So for instance, the second item I believe on the sheet that you're looking at, structural, new construction examiner, electrical, that's a mouthful of what we just call our building inspectors. So they're handling inspections of our commercial buildings, our commercial stores, our large, apartment buildings, anything more than a 1 or 2 family or 3 family kind of residential living. Those inspectors are doing that. And you can see there's 12 of those inspectors that are performing all of those all those inspections. But on top of that, we have a dedicated permit inspectors too. Down below, you can see we have 2 electrical inspectors, and then we have an HVAC inspector, and 2 out of the 12 number are commercial building inspectors that do just commercial permit inspections. So what we've done is really kind of ironed out direct responsibilities of our staff. So we have kind of quality of life inspectors dealing with existing property maintenance issues, both on residential and commercial. And then we have commercial building permit inspectors and residential permit inspectors. So that's how we've kind of, separated the job duties of our staff for coverage within each function area of our department.
So, just one thing to add to that about our use of these resources. So, since we do have an internal data team that's focused in part on code enforcement, we're right now implementing updated map that has to do with the allocation of where people are, so that we've put a lot of effort into understanding what types of properties and therefore what types of inspections are where. And so the map that we use to lay out where everybody goes, we evaluate that. So we've got an updated map right now, separate from the org chart. So everybody's included on that org chart, Council President. That has, what it does is it ensures that we don't have one inspector that's got a large geographic area, but perhaps only a handful of the types of buildings they inspect, and then somebody else that's overloaded. So it's an extremely equitable amount of work, so that we're able to make sure that it's just from how are we using our human capital, it's as efficient as possible.
So is the additional staffing, it's plan examiner 2? So is that for an effort to speed up the process, I assume?
So that is for plan review within permitting. That increase, just to give a summary of the increase in the numbers, so 4 of those positions overall are for our zoning planners total. So, and then 2 of them are for code enforcement commercial plan review. So this budget would allow us to add 2 additional full-time commercial plan reviewers that would be part of the commercial plan review around building permitting, which is, so this would be the first time that I've been before the council asking for additional support to add to the budget to help with that function specifically. And last July, with rezone, we now administer and enforce zoning with city staff. So 4 planners or plan reviewers are within zoning, and then we're asking for 2 additional to add to the commercial plan review.
You know what confuses me a little bit, to both of you, right? Because all of this is baked inside of neighborhood business development, right? And all of you in your departments, you have a lot of the same types of positions. And we don't know if they're with you, we don't know if they're with you, we don't know what part of NBD they belong to, so that's a little confusing.
So Council President, when we look at everything that has to do with the direct forward-facing work, so everything that has to do with constituent engagement, everything that has to do with the code enforcement related to inspections, that those positions, which is the majority of the positions that we have in the department, they're fairly clean in where they sit. Where you see overlap is in where there's intentional overlap, either because of support. So the data team, for instance, sits in both neighborhood development and in code enforcement, because we've got one data person that's specific to code enforcement and another that's not. So we do have some overlap right there. So in the org chart that I believe Nader was able to share with everybody earlier last week, we try to have everybody laid out as to who they report to. To your point, we do try to make the most use of everybody, so we are able to make sure that they're able to do work across divisions. But very happy to walk through any points of confusion.
Yeah, because, at this point, I don't think anybody at this table is going to deny housing, because we know we have an issue and a crisis with housing. But again, I'm looking at the different things within all of the departments, and I'm saying, okay, well, they have a planner for this and a planner for that and this for this and this, and it's like, oh, I have that chart.
Oh, okay.
So, okay.
So planner is one of those very broadly used terms.
Because you're a big department. You're
So-
probably one of our, along with DPW and police, you're a big department.
We straddle that ground, right? So I think of the big four with police, fire, DPW, and parks, and from a personnel standpoint, we're not the size of them. We've got a lot more people than assessment has. Yet we work with assessment constantly because of what it takes to make sure that we're collectively planning what good development looks like. And so really appreciate the partnership with them. Planner is one where, we've inherited some titles, and so we've stuck with it. So you've got a neighborhood planner position that does a ton of constituent engagement. So it's always a neighborhood planner that's at a TNT meeting, neighborhood planner that does the emergency repair program. We've got a sustainability planner within planning and sustainability. So we've got that term there as well. And then we've got plan reviewers. So as a former teacher, you look at the root word and then you want to confuse all of that. And I won't go into what it was when I was teaching English in
Commissioner?
6th grade.
I'm sorry, I have a question. Administrative aides, you have 6. Tell me what their titles are and what do they do?
So title is just that, administrative aid. They are almost overwhelmingly our first point of contact for anybody that calls into the code enforcement or emails into code enforcement, and making sure that we've got to receive their complaint, their concern, and get them routed in the right direction. There's probably more to it than that.
Yeah, so they answer all the call volumes coming into our division as a whole, as Michael noted, but behind the scenes on those 80,000 inspections that we perform annually, anything resulting in a violation, we have to follow due process and noticing. How we do all that is by actually serving and mailing out and delivering notices of violation in the mail, in U.S. mail. So
Are they out there in the field?
no, it's all office support work, making sure that, we're getting letters out from violations, that we're answering calls, we're scheduling inspections, so the customer service end of serving our department.
I think they should be out in the field because I think you need third party. I've gotten more than one complaint about Catholic Charities, that they work with these rentals and they're putting up. Now, the one point I want to make is at 1000 First North Street that we've discussed more than once. And I went into that house, the lady on Culver Street keeps on calling me. And the gentleman is elderly. He says, I see you were ticketed for all this trash. Sir, I'm elderly. I'll do the best I can. He's renting. He got it from Catholic Charities. Can I go in? It's not in good condition. So apparently Catholic Charities is working with another party. People own this property, and they're saying, yeah, you just go in there. And in many cases, it's not livable. Now, you've told me in the past that you have to get permission to go in these houses. And this is the problem I'm seeing, is that we have Catholic Charities doing things their way without any proper inspection, not working with your department, and people are living in these conditions. So I went over there to see all this trash on the lawn, overpiling. It's still there. It was there as of yesterday. And then we talked about this before the last 2 weeks. And there's the televisions. I don't know. Sometimes I get frustrated because it seems simple to pick up trash. And I just think that a lot of these LLCs are just taking advantage of this city. They're just walking, doing what they want to do. We saw this at 1414 Grant Boulevard. A business comes in, oh, we're going to open a smoke shop, and I go there, where are your permits? Well, I'll call you tomorrow. Then we have to go through this legal process, which took some time. And yet at the same time, if consent saying what's going on. So I don't know. Do you have enough staff? Maybe we're going to have to look for more staff?
So, Counselor, I appreciate you highlighting some of
Right.
the work, the direct work that
And it's
Jake's
hard.
team does.
It's hard work.
It is. Without getting into, you know, which agencies are doing
Right.
what work, I will say, Codes Director Ryan Scheel and I have been working directly with Catholic Charities on how we might have some agreement around the best way to maintain properties. The overall, regardless of who has the lease with the property, it's on the property owner. And then Director Scheel has also found places where within the code it is possible to cite the resident as well if they are clearly the source of the issue. And I think that to me that represents the work that we've done internally under Jake's leadership to find as many creative ways as possible, and especially in partnership with Corporation Counsel. You all saw it as we were finding new ways to deal with the Greens, to really address these issues that are not solved when we first tackle them head on with this with what we've got. And so I really commend Jake, I commend his team, and Sue Katzoff and her team, and Joe Barry, and you know, really in finding new tools for us to use to address these problems, because the goal, you know, certainly is that the city is not only safe, but it looks good. And we are partners with the Department of Public Works on that. If it's in the right of way, they take care of it. If it's outside the right of way on the private property, then that's code enforcement. And so we work really closely with them on that as well.
You know, I think of any of the departments, I mean, what we've had to deal with, not only the green situation, but the convenience store situation, the cannabis situation, all these things. And certainly because of your leadership, you know, you've been able to nimbly apply yourself to those situations, and we appreciate it totally. And always make sure, and I think you've done this before, is if we can help you, the Common Council help you in legislation, you know, at all, to help make you more effective. I particularly like what Councilor Monto brought up is that, you know, you're adding more planners. And I'm just wondering, are these planners just going to be tasked with getting the plans out the door, approved, and getting those projects going?
That's
If I
right.
Can I piggyback on Councilor Hogan, so maybe you can answer it all at once? Are these positions that you're adding, are you gearing up for the 81? How much more do you need to be ready for that?
Don't forget Micron either.
And
I mean,
Micron
yeah.
too. I mean, I would expect that you're gonna need more bodies. Is this halfway there? Is this a third of the way there? How many more?
Well, let me just jump in as well, because I've been waiting to bring up the fact that, that some of these estimates, Land Bank hasn't really been active in a year or
Because
two.
we were stopped by the
So-
Supreme Court of the United States.
Yeah,
that's
so
why.
now that the land bank is back up and running, as well as some of the other development projects, is like, was that taken into account? Or I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I guess I'll go back to and kind of work around to each of you.
And by
But
the way, I probably emailed Jake more than even the chief of police. But I've been taking a lot of pressure off and been emailing Ryan too, and Brian, so.
We're having a game, how much emails we send.
yeah, I got a tally running on.
You probably do.
No, but to answer your question, Councilor Hogan, specifically, the plans examiner position is an office position that's just doing construction plan review. So that is a functionality of trying to be as efficient as possible in getting commercial permits issued, but also doing our jobs to protect the health and well-being of our constituents. I mean, you know, part of doing this is to ensure major code compliance with things like fire controls and exiting, structural reviews. I mean, there's a lot in the code to review. I'm talking thousands and thousands and thousands of pages that these plans need to be compliant with. So those people will be doing just that. To kind of get into Jimmy's point, or Councilor Monto's point about you know, planning for Micron and 81. You know, I'm always projecting out and trying to plan for the future. Code enforcement, the reason why we've been really successful with code enforcement in the last few years is because we have adapted well to the changing environment around us, and specifically with COVID in particular, Our permit office didn't shut down during all of that. We were probably the only one in the county or the region that still issued permits during that because, we invested in digital solutions and we had online permitting and people could access that even though we weren't physically in the office at that time. But we're always looking at how the environment's going to change around us and what that's going to mean. And, I can't predict the future per se, but we anticipate growth, right? We want more construction here. We want to add more housing. We want more development. We want more commercial buildings. We want office space. We want people to work here. We want people to entertain here. We want people to dine here. So, I think we're at the very beginning stages of seeing the 81 project underway, to the south of the city at the 481 interchange and, to the northern borders. When the elevated portion of this bridge comes down through the city, we're still a couple budgets out from that. So I think we have a lot of time to plan around that. But we are, if you look at our projections and you look at our numbers, like we have a big increase in single family construction of homes. The most I think in my time overseeing this division. And that number we anticipate is going to keep growing. All across the board, our revenue, we project our revenue up across the board for everything that we do. That includes any fees that we charge through code enforcement, but obviously any permitting fees. And in relation to what the land bank's doing, a pause in that, certainly had an impact. I think it's good to kind of get that back up and running. But as far as what it means around permitting and kind of revamping and renovations to those homes, the good news around that is we've been able to decrease the number of our vacant structures significantly under this administration to the lowest that in a long time. Probably, I think we're right around 1,300 or so, give or take. At one point in time, we were well over 2,100. So out of those 1,300 or so vacant structures, how many of those make it to the land bank? How many of those become demo candidates? How many of those are going to be prime candidates for renovation, that need permitting? I think we have the staff to handle that capacity out of that percentage when you look at it from a numbers game. But I will say this, we're seeing investment in properties that I think people wouldn't touch pre-COVID. People are buying property that they wouldn't have bought, 4 or 5 years ago. So that's a good sign for our city. That's a good sign for our neighborhoods that we're seeing investment in some of these structures. Because the longer they sit, the more likely that it's going to decay structurally or there could be a fire. Obviously we see a lot of that, especially recently. There's a lot of, vacant structure fires throughout the city. So it's something that we're constantly working with fire prevention on and the fire department to kind of get a grasp of. But obviously we want those back on the tax rolls. We want those to be occupied dwelling units if we can. But I think right now we have the capacity to handle that.
Jake, sorry, go ahead.
With the, majority of vacant structures being transferred to the land bank, when does your department do demos?
So nearly 2/3 of all vacant structures are tax current, believe it or not, which means they're still under private ownership. City doesn't own them, land bank doesn't own them. Somebody somewhere owns it. So we monitor those monthly. We monitor them for open to entry, so board ups on doors and windows on the first floor, overgrowth. So we have a contractor who does grass cutting just as a part of code enforcement on vacant houses and vacant lots citywide that are non-city owned.
So that,
yeah.
that's something legislation might be contemplated on. You just said 2/3 of the vacant property, those properties, are owned by somebody, and there's been in some cities, they've contemplated a vacant property tax, an extra fee. So, that's something that maybe we should look at, and I know we've discussed it as far as administration goes.
Yeah.
To put something in a productive use, put people in those houses.
But even the ones when you talked about burnouts, because it's one, I can't remember where it is right now, but it's this big white house and you look out and all the windows are burnt out, it's all burnt out. When do we take those down?
Sure. So it goes from worst condition, we start with those. So emergency demolitions, they get reviewed by, usually the director or myself and the chief of fire prevention. are out looking at these. If we can declare an emergency demolition, it comes down within a matter of days, if not sooner. So think worst of the worst, really bad fire, roof collapse, foundation collapses, blows in. Those ones we have to take down.
Barrett Street.
Barrett Street.
I can't remember the word.
Now, after that, we kind of have in order, we have like burnouts or vacants that we evaluate that don't reach that threshold. Those ones we have to pursue court orders for demolition. So we actually have to go before a judge, make our case, and hope that they issue an order that says, yes, City of Syracuse, you can demo this property. So it's kind of a balancing game. Usually our numbers are, history has shown our numbers for emergency demolitions are somewhere between 12 and 24. But we just never know the size of those structures and how much that's going to cost to take those down. So a bulk of the budget around that is for emergencies, but anything that we have left over towards the end of the fiscal year, we have lined up a number of court order demos that we have a year to execute on. So we kind of have those waiting in queue that we then go after those. And then beyond that, we have ones that we just continue to monitor, that we issue violations on, and we hope to get back habitable, back in good shape without violations. So with that, we issue scores on our vacant structures. So we kind of give a property valuation on 1, 2, 3, 4. A lot of that information that our inspectors go out and get transfers directly to the planners, not to be confused with the code enforcement plan reviewers or plans examiners, but and all the work that they're doing around revitalizing neighborhoods and doing infill, and where are we going to focus on putting new housing, because we've got strategic demolition on certain streets or in certain neighborhoods. So
And not to stop you on that, Jake, but this is where, when I think we were talking at this housing strategy, and I kept saying, this street, this street, this street, and then they said, well, home headquarters is over there. So that's where I think when you talk about the different housing things that's popping up, for me, I can't speak for the rest of the council, but to have an overlay of home headquarters is over here, Empire is over here, City is over here, whoever is over here, and lay it down, because that's confusing to not know who's working where and who's building where.
So the idea of mapping out from demolition to construction of new, is that what I'm understanding, Council President? Okay, yeah, so
Because not to cut you, because Caitlin's doing demolition, so we're all over.
right, there's a lot of activity. So when you look at the demolitions, those activities are generally in our neighborhoods that have struggled the most, because that's where the private market has said, hey, look, there's just not the reason to invest in this property, and it continues to change hands as people pull cash out of it, to the point where it's no longer habitable. So you don't see that in Winkworth, right? You don't see that in Sedgwick. You see that in the neighborhoods where, going back to the first red line map of Syracuse in 1919, and also those are the areas where we've got our enforcement is strongest legislatively related to lead and lead paint for exactly that same reason. It's the overlay of where we have the concentrated investments for our HUD entitlement dollars. We can absolutely work with you around what types of stuff you'd like to have mapped out. We've got the ability to do that within the
You have
team.
mappers, right?
So our planner, some of our planners are good at mapping. Absolutely, yeah. It's a skilled group.
One more question for you, right? When we talk about demos, do you guys and home headquarters maybe get together and get bulk pricing for demos?
So the demolition is interesting in the fact that so much of it has to do with how much it costs to be able to dispose of what is pulled down. So that's a major driver of what that cost is. And the landfills are not really concerned about being price competitive when it comes to, hey, you're going to bring us a ton more stuff.
that does happen sometimes, though. With emergencies, it can be tough, but there have been times where we've had multiple emergencies within a matter of days where, we have a low bidding process, so sometimes it works itself out. that somebody might bid lowest on both. But, you know, I would imagine the land bank's doing that and trying to get,
RFP,
you know,
RFP.
but it also depends on, like, if you have a emergency, obviously there's no ability to go in and abate anything, right? You're just gonna take it down as is, could have, you know, asbestos, it could have other issues. And that has to go to a different type of landfill, which is more expensive to dispose of those materials. Depends on the type of construction. You get a brick building, for example, versus wood frame, it's gonna be a lot more expensive just because of the weight and the material. But, you know, we do see that sometimes where some things can be kind of in bulk. But it depends on the process, on what's needed. If we have to bid it out, then we take low bid, you know, a competitive low bid on that.
Michael, the one
Wait,
point,
wait, wait, before we get away from that subject, so you said that, you guys take a score based on, is it ready for demo? Say a fire structure, for instance. If a structure isn't at demo rate at today, but never is redeveloped, how, like, are you guys coming back to, is that the fire department, like, who's checking if year to year that score starts to increase?
Sure. So that's another kind of process that we work very closely with our planners on. So our inspectors are out in the neighborhoods. They're looking at these houses, you know, every couple of weeks. Our housing inspectors are looking at these vacant structures. Separate from that, I know the fire department sends their firehouses around when they aren't busy with calls, and they're checking them too. You know, similar reasoning, but also because it's very dangerous to send firefighters into these vacant structures.
We had over on Otisco
So,
that just burned out
you
over
know-
there, and the firefighters got injured. So are those gonna be demoed? Because they were set on fire by them folks.
Yeah, any fire, we go out and evaluate the structure and make a determination on that. So Chief Davis, myself, and Ryan, Assistant Director Eisenberg, we evaluate all those and then make a decision, and we work closely with our law department when we do make that decision and get the, you know, get the gears running to do that. But, sorry, just to go back to your question, which was around,
Are they going back?
right, yeah, so we do that evaluation annually, so we update those numbers, so we know what the changes are, which then informs if it becomes a court order. Obviously, if we find a situation that is an emergency, like an inspector finds a, you know, foundation that blew in since the last time they looked at it, you know, that's probably something that's going to rise to an emergency situation. But we also note when structural failures, you know, might look worse over the years. Like the roof looks bad this year, and next year it gets a little bit worse, and then the year after that, like maybe it starts to even sag or collapse in a little bit in certain areas. We make note of that, and then we have to evaluate based on other properties and kind of put them in a ranking of worst to best, and then make a decision on which direction it's going to go. But certainly,
I think you guys should also take into accountability, quality of life for the neighborhood as well, because I'm just gonna speak to a property on my street, which is Wood Ave, and there's a property that caught fire maybe 3-4 years ago, and I mean, it's terrible. I didn't understand why it didn't come down, but the owner at the time put it up for sale. I believe it was sold. Nothing still happened to this property. This is not a like small amount of damage. It was severely damaged, and the house next door to it was just reconstructed, and so like no one wants to live next to that house. So after so long, I think that either it should be taken down if there is no movement from the owner to do anything. So that's just.
yeah, I agree 100%, and it's, you know, everybody I talk to that lives next to a vacant property, I totally understand. If I had a magic wand, I'd, you know, rehab all of them or demo all of them or a combination of the two. But it's what we work towards every day, every month, every quarter, every year. And we have made progress overall, and I understand that that's frustrating for those that live right next to or adjacent or across the street or on the same street. We understand the challenges and the decrease in the quality of life around those, and we work every day on trying to improve that. But it does become a legal process when we reach that point to try to pursue a demolition. If we can't declare it as an emergency that's, you know, dangerous and could hurt, you know, somebody, then we have to go through that process. And we don't 100% control all of that, but happy to take a look specifically at that one in particular, Counselor. But we continue to evaluate all of them overall and try to allocate the resources we have to address those.
Do we pursue grants to allocate
What
for
Jimmy
these
was
kind of
next.
initiatives? I'm sorry.
So we haven't applied any grants to these functions in my history, and you know.
So a couple of things, because this is, to Councilor Jones-Roser point, around, hey, you know, we should take these down as well. As Jake is explaining the process of the fact that it's code enforcement, but it's also law, this is a resource challenge for us, right? So as much as we'd love to take them all down, we put $4 million specifically of ARPA funds over to the land bank and eliminated hundreds that way. So that was a way to do it that didn't impact the city general fund, right? And so we're always trying to find out what that balance is and what's the right amount to be able to allocate towards that. From a grant standpoint, probably not surprising to you, it's not a really sexy thing for funders to come in and say, guess what we did? We tore down a building. We are, at times, able to do that with some CDBG funding. So one of the lines that you see in the CDBG budget every year is distressed property. It is because of the requirements of that then have to be replaced on that parcel of land because of the fact that we used HUD entitlement dollars to do it. That really is, from a redevelopment standpoint, we try to really limit that to properties where we know that we're going to have income-restricted housing built directly on top of it, or directly in replacement of it. So that is the grant funding we're able to use.
Michael, didn't we get some money from the AG and the controller at some point for some of this?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Deputy Commissioner Sapansky to speak to it.
Michelle Spansky, Deputy Commissioner of Neighborhood Development. So we've gotten funds from the AG's office at a couple points in time over the last couple of years. So one of the first particular programs that we had was to start the initial pilot for the blight busting program. So correcting exterior code violations on bank-owned zombie properties that are tax current. I think probably most recently, to Commissioner Collins's point, a lot of the funding has been concentrated within ARPA allocations, either directly to the land bank or to other programs that have kind of helped do some of these different types of property repairs, like the emergency repair.
Didn't drop us a big chunk of change to do demos? I think
I do believe that Caitlin, and I think some of that ran directly through the land bank at the time. But yeah, the AG's office has been a huge supporter of all things related to code enforcement and kind of mitigating the impact of the housing crisis in the early 2000s. So the source of funding that we have right now that we're working to kind of do this in addition to CDBG, we have some funding that we got from Senator Schumer's office to do a combination of both kind of strategic blight removal, so that could be inclusive of demolitions or kind of expanded blight busting projects, and then also continuing the work with the emergency repair program. So once those we use up all those ARPA funds, we have those additional resources to draw from.
How many zombie properties do we have, you think, Jake?
So I think kind of actual number fluctuates a little bit. There's suspected zombies, to Jake's point. About 2/3 of the vacant structures that we have are tax current. There's a gap between those vacant structures that are tax current and those that are registered with New York State to be determined to be zombies. I would have to double check with our data director kind of off the top of my head exactly what the number is of confirmed properties on the Department of Financial Services registry, but we are working really closely with the law department to really continue to escalate our enforcement of those properties. So there's expanded provisions that the state has for properties that are owned by servicers or that are in the hands of some semblance of bank control where they have not completed those foreclosures, and there's provisions that we can work through and a process we can work through to make sure that those servicers are being held accountable. I think something that we have seen just from the work, the blight busting, is that that has been an effective strategy. We've had a couple pretty pricey projects that we've done to the tune of $30,000, $40,000 that we've seen that that's ultimately been what's kind of the blimp on the radar, I guess, for the servicers to actually sell the properties and get them back into the use of somebody who's going to reoccupy them.
So how do we make them, I mean, that's the frustration that sometimes in the neighborhoods is that, of course, we cite, it goes to the BAA. The BAA can't really do anything except put a lien on the property, and then nobody really wants the property if it's burned out, empty, and all that. So I think, I don't know, we need another probably hammer in order to get that. I mean, what else do we do? That's
I think,
about it.
so I guess the answer to the question, it depends on the exact specifics of the property. I think we try to figure out based on the different property characteristics, who's the owner, is it already tax delinquent, is it a property that is a immediate life safety demolition candidate? Like, we identify based on a number of factors, what do we think the path to least resistance is going to be? Sometimes there are situations in which we try to do, if it's tax delinquent, but also a major demo risk, we'll put it through the law pipeline and pursue it through the tax foreclosure pipeline, and basically whichever way we can get it done the quickest, that one will end up kind of winning out. So it's not a perfect system, and I think we're still, there's a lot of things that we're looking to continue to try to improve kind of the pace at which BAA is able to work on things. There's some tight parameters that they're held to in terms of not necessarily being able to work as aggressively as they would even like to be, just in terms of kind of the provisions that prevent some of the rollovers of those fines and fees. But those are all things we're looking at. And
The deputy commissioner just mentioned, where do we stand with that, Joe, the rollovers? I think that comes up, I remember
be a
President
different
Hudson.
budget hearing.
You know, rollovers as far as rolling over fines and everything else under the taxes. Yeah. I mean, there's always been a problem with that, and I think we brought that up. That would help, but there's a state provision or something like that. What's the
Yes,
deal?
good morning, Joe Barry, First Assistant Corporation Counsel. The challenge of rolling over under the taxes for code enforcement purposes is that there's a current state law that does not really fit with our Tax and Assessment Act. So we've been having discussions with the state to try to resolve that discrepancy, and those are ongoing. So we hope to have some resolution this year, but it's been difficult to reconcile the two.
Do we ever go after any of these people civilly? Like a long dormant, like the house next to Councilor Rouser here?
To some extent, it becomes a cost issue because we have to pay fees to go into court
I mean, as an example.
for civil.
Could we go I mean, is it possible to go after them? I mean, I know it's obviously the cost involved, but could we go after them civilly, maybe as an example? I mean, sometimes that works.
I think it depends on the property and the violations. So every one of these situations is kind of case specific. But
right,
there are
Jimmy.
different options.
Michael, the 1.3 million from contracted services, are there SURA positions in that?
So that's the 54, 170?
Yeah.
1700? Yes, those are SURA positions.
Okay, so how many more positions, the 58, how many more are there in addition being paid through SURA?
It's a division of what you see on here as opposed to additional positions that are, I've got that correct, right?
There's probably about 10 or 12 additional positions that are non-union, that are maybe executive or management positions that help run the department.
So yes, so the breakdown here is going to be what's related to civil service, what's not civil service. But so the overall, what you're seeing is a combination of about 70 positions total.
Okay.
And can I go back up to the plan examiner too? Two questions related. One is, why did we decide to go with the plan examiner 2 rather than a 1? And the second goes to Councilor Monto and kind of projecting into the future. How did you come up with the +5 number, as opposed to +3 or +7?
So just to break down, historically, we've had 2 plans examiner ones, which are residential, and within code enforcement directly, we've had more recently we've had just 2 plans examiner 2. So what we've done is how that number got from 1 to 6. Overall, it includes 4 zoning reviewers, which are also plans examiners because they're reviewing plans for zoning compliance. But 2 of those are plan reviewer 2s, and 2 of those are plans examiner 1s right now. One of the planner 1s I'm trying to promote to a 2, so we would have 3 2s and 1 doing zoning. And the reason we're asking for 2 additional plans examiner 2s is because they do the commercial reviews, and that's the service that we're trying to increase efficiencies around, so our commercial building permitting process.
Is that +2 based upon demand, as in, we know that each individual can process X amount per period of time, and here's the volume that we see?
Yes, and all that includes goals and timelines that we have on issuance of those specific permit types, and the work that is, entailed around all of that.
What do you think the benefit will be? Again, we talk about, are we saving money, are we generating money, or are we providing a service to the city? What does that look like?
Yeah, so you can, if you're looking, so for large commercial buildings that include residential, that's going to be site specific. If you're looking to build for your business within central New York, you can build in the city or not. And so what's our ability to turn around and deliver and make sure that in all of the ways in which we're able to attract somebody here, it includes being efficient and being able to make sure that whoever it is that's going to be building the structure that they're going to occupy is able to do that. And so, Jake's been looking at a variety of different ways to do it. The more we move through, permits come with fees, then the more revenue we generate from those permit fees. And as well as simply all of the business activity that starts earlier because we didn't have a delay in being able to get that structure complete.
And we need to rapidly build housing, right? I mean,
We need to rapidly build housing, and we need to make sure that we are considered a place that, as the economy grows, that businesses say, not only do I want to be there, I can see myself actually being successful in getting to the point of opening my business or expanding my business or keeping my business there. Absolutely.
What's the jump to 55 in the operating equipment?
So which page are you looking at, just so I'm?
141, year 25.
Yeah, so this is something that we're looking to add for the safety, not only the safety of our inspectors, but also for transparency and accountability. We recently went through a lengthy process with our surveillance technology committee for approval for our code officers out in the field to have body-worn cameras. So that is what that is for. Unlike fire department and police department, our code officers are alone. They're not partnered up with anybody. They're in their own vehicles. They're not in a city vehicle. They don't have specific uniforms. So we have a ID badge, and they go out and they do their work day to day.
Has this already been
How do you
sought
store it?
after?
How do you store it, and how long do you keep the video?
So the policy around how we're going to operate is still, being worked on, but it's going to be an offshoot of what our police department does. It's through the same company, and we'll have the same type of storage. Obviously, a lot less than them because we don't have as many officers. We don't have as many hours in around the clock. We don't have coverage 24 hours a day like the police department does. So We'll have a lot less storage needs than they will, but it'll be,
Is your policy in place?
it's not, like, we don't even have these yet. We're looking to purchase these this summer
Okay.
and then implement it, end of the year.
Okay.
Did that come through through like, well, you're going with the ones that the police do, but was that in the budget?
It has not been in the budget.
Not in the budget, in the, what, capital improvement? Was that in there?
I don't think this is a capital, considered a capital improvement with the, with the size of the ask and
Yeah.
that, and the type of technology.
Okay, okay. All right. And that wouldn't, 55, that wouldn't be like one per inspector? Is it as needed when they go out?
No, this is to cover everybody that goes out in the field every day.
each
So
person will have
it,
their
it
own
covers about
person.
close to 30 cameras.
And I have one more question. I'm looking at, the 500 line, professional services. Actual 2023, it was $12,000. And you're going out, you're asking for 185. So I'm trying to understand that jump.
So that's a great question. The adopted was 160,000. We're looking at increasing for 25,000 overall. I'm not sure why we've got an expected projected at only 3,500. Typically, this is related to a personnel line, and I'd want to take a look and go back. And I'm getting a nod that I'm speaking incorrectly from my budget director, so we will clarify that for you, Council President.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mary.
One last question, I think, well, for me anyway. The uniform, so in that same contractual services, that's cleaning uniforms, they're like cleaning of uniforms?
So that is part of CSEA contract negotiations for the first time ever. Last contract negotiated a mandate that our inspectors receive a uniform allowance to purchase clothes to wear to work, even though we don't have a uniform.
Well, that's the 150, that's up here, but down here we have uniforms. For
Right.
35.5.
Oh, that is also by union contract. We have to provide rain gear when needed, and we also have a boot expense for those that are around construction job sites for safety shoes. And then on top of that, we do issue a reflective kind of highlighter colored vest that says code enforcement. So no matter what you're wearing, summertime, wintertime, you can throw it on over a coat, over a t-shirt, anything you're wearing, it can go on top of.
Find you at a black light party.
Yes.
Commissioner, I'm sorry. I have a question about the travel, training, and development. Are they going out of town to be trained, or can you expand on that, please?
Yeah, so there's a combination of different conferences that take place annually. One challenge is we can't all close down the same week and go out of town or go to a local conference. So we have to kind of spread it out. For code enforcement training, we send people to Rochester, Albany, Lake Placid. There's a local conference here. Every code officer has to have 24 hours of in-service training annually that's certified. So we have trainings for that. But also we have other conferences around, code enforcement. We have planning and zoning conferences that we have staff attend. So one thing that we've been very intentional about is having career pathways within our division as a whole. So you can come in more entry level, get experience on the job, go to conferences, and, be promoted within. I'm really sensitive to that because where I started out was cutting grass as a high school student on vacant lots. And, now I'm sitting here in front of you all. So we want to be intentional about that. We're trying to bring people in that want to make a career out of working in city government and provide those pathways. So the travel and training is part of that, what we want to sell to candidates and what we hope for people why they want to work here.
I just wanted to ask you one last question. It has nothing to do with personnel, though. You were reviewing a few weeks or months back the fee structure for the non-compliance or infractions when you go out there and do your inspections. Can you give us a little bit of a timeline on that, or?
Around like BA fines, you mean? Yeah, so, we're always evaluating that. I know Councilor Hogan's also a big proponent on taking a look at any fines or penalties. So we'll work with the folks from BA and the administration, our law team, on kind of evaluating, what those thresholds should be at, what the minimum should be for, different types of violations.
That includes everything, right? Rental registry or any kind of inspection that you may do.
For fines and penalties, yes. There's different levels depending on what type of violation it is.
Chronic offenders, raising the fees, and maybe public stacks in Clinton Square where we could put them in.
Yeah, I mean, listen, those of you that I work closely with know that I'm open to add any tool that we can use to get to compliance, because if we can't get voluntary compliance from owners, then it really becomes a legal process on, what can we do to compel them? What can we do to actually provide the service that we want them to do and then charge them for it? I'll say this, we've been more aggressive now than we ever have been. I mean, in the 20-plus years that I've been around code enforcement, we are more aggressive now in taking action against bad landlords, cleaning properties, getting warrants, shutting down illegal occupancies. I mean, we've really been on top of it, and I commend our staff as a whole. But also the rest of the city of Syracuse, the other departments. We work more closely now than we ever have been with our partners at DPW, fire department, police department. It's a joint effort. And if you ever come out to one of these home unit inspections or one of these septet cleanups, like, it's amazing. There's representation from multiple departments, and it might not sound like it's something special, but go talk to some other cities that have struggles around that relationship building and working together. Like, we really have it figured out.
So you will have a new fee structure at some point, or
At some point, yes. So the fee structure is one of the things that we really want to figure out over the next fiscal year, and ideally get to a point of implementing it. It's a combination of being able to figure out, when you look at the fact that we've got 100 types of licenses, right, and then you've all the different types of permits that we've got, and then everything that all the different fees that we have, fees and fines that we have. It's one of those things where on the surface you're like, oh, I should be able to take care of that pretty quick. And then it's really, really not, because we have to look at not only each individual one, but then how does that compare equitably across similar or contrasting fees and fines as well.
And again, that's not something we can do locally because there's some state regulation that
Well,
impacts that.
a lot of what we're able to do, locally. Yeah, again, it's another one of those. As we prioritize all the different ways in which we're trying to make sure that we're being as responsive as possible for our constituents. Where do we classify the work that needs to be carved out for that? Because plates are full, so as something comes off, either because we finished it or because we decided that needs to wait as something else comes onto it, that's a kind of a constant evaluation and decision making that we're making. So yes, we're going to look at it. It is a big project.
All right, so I think that concludes this meeting. We do appreciate the feedback from your department, Jake and Commissioner.
Thank you.
Appreciate the time, opportunity to talk about it. And I do want to say, you are all consistently so supportive of the work that happens with the code enforcement. I feel like you guys really understand it and the impact on constituents. So appreciate the fact that I feel like it's a partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Have a nice day.
Ouch.